Hello, hello, good morning, welcome. Thank you for being here. Good morning. As participants are finding their way into today's session, I'm going to say good morning and welcome. This is the final, well, almost final series in the 2025 Child Abuse Prevention Month webinars. My name is Jessica Matley. I am so excited to bring with you such an exciting conversation led by a wonderful group of panelists. We've got a moderator. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about in about 60 seconds or less. So as you come in, as you make your way in here, I'm just going to ask that you tell us where you're joining from in the chat. Maybe tell us the organization, maybe tell us the county, where you're joining from. Tell us in the chat. We like to put names to places. You could drop it right in there. Yolo, welcome. What other counties are we joining from? Fresno. Hello, Tahama. As we have experienced the last couple of weeks together, we've been excited to see representation throughout the counties in California and beyond. Hello, LA. Hi, Sacramento. Kings County with Sia, Ventura. Welcome, San Diego. All right. I will get us started in just about 30 seconds as people are coming on in. Hello, welcome. To those just joining, you have found your way to the 5th session in the 2025 Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar series. We're excited to bring with us incredible information and discussion today with some panelists. As we get started, I'm going to give you some brief introduction, just some information to get you ready, if you will, for today's discussion and beyond. All right, I think we're good. Let's get started, shall we? So hello to everybody. I've seen we have some folks jumping on and we will admit them from the waiting room. You have found your way to the 5th webinar in the 2025 Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar series. This session took a village, if you will, to come together, and that is the theme for this series. So what I'd like to do is give you a few pieces of information to get us started. First and foremost, we are so thankful to have the opportunity to provide today's discussion and conversation translated in real-time Spanish. So what you'll see on this next page is that there are some instructions. If you would like to listen to today's discussion in Spanish, live time, we do have an interpreter, Carmen, who is on with us, who will be able to lead that discussion. So in just a moment, an option is going to appear at the bottom of your toolbar. It looks like a globe. I will point to it with my mouse here on the screen. When that globe appears, you will have the option to select Spanish, and everything being said in this English room will be interpreted for you live time into Spanish. If you're as grateful as I am that we have that opportunity, give me a reaction in the chat. I always love to know who else is as excited about that as we are around here. Thank you. Me too. I know. So, Carmen, if you want to say good morning, we'll get that interpretation option started for you. Oh, I believe we might have already moved her into that room. Okay, so she is in there waiting for all of you, and now you should see that globe available at the bottom of your screen. Okay, some other things that you should know about today's session. This discussion is being recorded. A copy of this recording will be made available to you in about 2 days to your email that you registered with, along with any accompanying resources that were discussed. And if you would like to see all of the sessions that have been done so far, we have a YouTube channel. We've created a playlist for you. Thank you. You can see that in the chat right now. When you go into that YouTube channel, you won't just see the information about each session, you'll also see resources that were discussed as well. So all of that is readily available for you. And in just a moment, we're going to talk about a resource called an action sheet. We've shared that action sheet with you before, but you're going to want it more now than ever. But before great, we can see that right into the chat. That action sheet will allow you to keep notes about today's discussion, but there's a very important second page that we're going to review here in just a moment. And as a reminder, this session is the 5th in a line of discussions that were planned throughout the month of April. You might notice that there is a date crossed out for webinar number 3, the Lunch and Learn with Safe and Sound. Now, I don't know about you, but some of us had things to do on April the 16th at 12 p.m. But Zoom decided they weren't working that day. They took the day off. And so many of you had Zoom meetings that were canceled or affected, and this webinar would be one of those. And so that session was rescheduled for May 14th. If you have already registered, you don't need to re-register. The same link will work May 14th. But today we're talking about the power of lived expertise. You'll see that at the bottom with that orange indicator arrow, the power of lived expertise in building the village of support for children and families. It's going to be a panel conversation led by a moderator. And we'd love to have a speaker join us here in just a moment, Amanda Font, who is going to give us just a little bit of context about the theme of this series and a little reminder of who has participated throughout this journey. Good morning, Amanda. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sharing part of your morning with us and being here today to close out the Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar series. I'm Amanda Font, manager within the Child Abuse Prevention within the Department of Social Services. I'm a mom to 3 girls and believe everyone has a role to play in preventing child abuse and neglect and helping all children reach their full potential. We wanted to express our gratitude to our partners and all those who have presented and contributed to the series. Our partners include the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, Caltrend, CAP Center, and Safe and Sound. This month was an important time to reflect on the progress we've made, recognize the challenges that still lie ahead, and renew our commitment to protecting children and supporting families. As professionals in various fields, whether you work in social services at a CAPC or FRC, education, healthcare, law enforcement, or the many other critical roles to child and safety well-being, your expertise, dedication, and compassion are vital in preventing abuse and neglect. In short, professionals act as the village by working together, sharing resources, and creating a network of support that surrounds families with the help that they need. Once again, thank you so much for being here and your dedication to this cause. Your work makes a difference every single day. Together, we are building a safer, stronger California for all of our children. And to stay connected to the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, you can join CalPrevents, the OCAP newsletter, or reach out to us directly. Thank you again and enjoy this series.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I am curious, for people on the line, how many webinars did you come to this month? So this would be one, but did you attend any others? Tell me in the chat. You could tell me how many total you might have registered for, or maybe that you attended. Maybe this is your first one. You could tell me that. 4. First one, Rocio, welcome. So happy to have you. I've seen 2. Great. 4. Wonderful. Okay, so for those of you that have attended 4, I'm guessing you're going to attend number 5 in May. We hope that you do. And for anybody that didn't get a chance to attend another session, maybe it just didn't fall at time you were able to participate, don't forget that you can still watch the replays and get all the resources that are available on that YouTube link. And we've made, thank you, that is in the chat for you now. And there's one other thing I want to say. We've had a chance to hang together in April, and I loved that. But you know that you can stay connected to partners and resources all year long. So on the second page of that action sheet that we provided for you, and as a reminder, this action sheet serves 2 very unique purposes. Number 1, it allows you to keep track of notes, ideas, highlights, resources that stand out to you throughout today's session. So they're fillable. Take notes. But also on the, I want to say about the third page, you'll see that there is a list of Child Abuse Prevention Month resources. These resources have been mentioned throughout today's and previous sessions. This also gives you access to the partners that came together to put this series on. So we want to make sure that this is available to you, and we're so excited to be able to provide that. Today's session is the 5th in the line of series. It is the power of lived experience in building the village of support for children and families. We have a panelist and moderator that is going to be joining us here in just a moment. And just so you know, this discussion should be going on for about the next, we're going to call it 70 minutes or so. So we will be wrapping up this discussion close to 12:30 Pacific time, and also throughout the course of the conversation. If you have questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, maybe a question about the discussion happening, you could drop that in the Q&A pod at the bottom of the screen, or you can drop it into the chat. Easier if we keep them separate in that pod though. And if somebody says something and you want to give them a little encouragement, maybe they shared something and you're like, oh, I feel that, me too, or that was super helpful to know. You know, in a virtual space, we can't necessarily clap them up, but we can give them a reaction in the chat. That's always the way that we say, I hear that, I support that, that's a great idea, some sort of encouragement. So to lead this discussion, we're super excited to have a moderator with us. That would be Sabrina Forte, Assistant Director of Equity and Inclusion at the California Department of Social Services. Sabrina will be leading a panel discussion, and I'd like to introduce the three panelists that we're going to be hearing from. We have Tacoria Jones, parent advocate for the Casey Thriving Families, Safer Children Initiative, and a board member at Be Strong Families. We have Dr. Kimberly Offit, an inspirational speaker, author, child advocate, social worker, and adoptive parent. And of course, Juan Solis, father engagement coordinator from San Bernardino County Children's Network and chair of the Inland Empire Family Father Involvement Coalition. And with that, we want to say welcome, Sabrina, welcome panelists, and we are very grateful for your time this morning.
All right. Thank you, Jess. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for being here today for this powerful panel discussion as Child Abuse Prevention Month comes to an end. I will be brief. My name is Sabrina Forte. I serve as the Assistant Director of Equity and Inclusion for Children and Family Services at CDSS. So in this role, I advise and assist our department leadership to improve outcomes among communities that are overrepresented in California's child welfare and foster care programs. And importantly, because I myself do not have direct lived experience in these systems, I rely heavily and humbly on the expertise of those who do. And I feel extremely privileged to moderate today's panel of experts. They are three incredible leaders from across the country. And I hope you leave this discussion empowered to contribute in your own way to prevent child abuse and ensure that every child and family can be wrapped with the care, resources, and support that they need to thrive. So with that, let's get into it. We have prepared a few questions for today, and we'll likely build on each other's responses and just have a really dynamic discussion. But to kick us off, and as a heads up, Dr. Kim, this first question is coming to you first, and then we'll move through the panel. How has your personal experience with child welfare and other family impacting systems informed your professional journey and the work that you do now?
Well, thank you, Sabrina, and thank all of y'all for being here. If you don't mind, what I would like to do is just take my mask off, right? This is one of the spaces when I think about even the title, like what my lived experience coming here, it would be hard for me to be scripted. So just know I took a few notes about the things that I may want to say. I may not even say them all. But I don't have a script, so interrupt me. I'm looking at my panel. If you guys want to chime in, please chime in because I'm a storyteller and I love to share stories. But let me tell y'all, I'm 48 years old and I feel like I have grown up and lived in so many ways in child welfare because before my brain was even fully formed, I was making these big decisions, right? I'm 22 years old, straight out of college, making big decisions in the lives of children and families. So I started off as an intern actually for the Department of Family and Children Services. And then eventually 26 years later, I'm an executive director for a nonprofit organization. Somewhere in there, I decided to be a foster and an adoptive parent myself. But I've learned so much with these various hats that I've worn. As an intern, it was like the school of what not to do in so many ways. You know, there was a lot of things that I saw that I did not like, that I saw that I wanted to do differently. And I never wanted to be a social worker. Like legitimately, this was not my gig. This was not what I wanted to do. I actually thought, when I thought about a social worker, I imagined this white woman with brown hair and black suit, scratchy stockings. She drove a black tinted vehicle, and she went into people's neighborhoods with garbage bags, and she snatched children out of their homes, dragging them down the street, and you put them in the car, and you never saw these kids again. What terrible movie did I see? I have no idea. Where did I get that from? I have no idea, but I never wanted to be that. So in the work that I've done, how did my lived experience, I guess, I think that was the original question, how did that impact the work that I do and the decisions that I make? Again, as an intern, School of What Not to Do, knowing that these are families, we're making big decisions that can change the trajectory of children and families' lives, first and foremost. Okay. And then as a foster and an adoptive parent, sitting on the opposite end, I'm thinking about how this system, I heard since 1998, y'all, when I stepped into this space, the system is broken. We're still saying that today. That is not okay, right? And so you're seeing from the opposite end of how this system impacts children, how it impacts families, how it impacts those who are stepping in with a heart to serve and the desire to make an impact, but they're getting wounded. They're wounded warriors as well. I can say as a foster and an adoptive mom, I am a parent to 7 children. My oldest 4 were adopted from foster care. And I can sit here today and tell you that had I been their caseworker, they would still be with their parents. But yet they have my last name. I've learned so much, and it has impacted the way now that I lead, the way that I train foster and adoptive parents, the way I recruit staff to do this work, leading with cultural humility, understanding trauma, and having a trauma lens in the decisions that they make. It impacts the way that I think I already said, training foster and adoptive parents, training my staff, the hiring of staff, being who I am in the years of being in this space, you can't help but be impacted by this work that you do. It totally changes everything about you, how you make decisions, the writing of your policy, how you implement the policies, everything. And again, because I'm unscripted, I'm going to stop right there because I don't know how long I was talking, but I would love to volley this to someone else if they would like to chime in.
Thank you, Dr. Kim
Sure.
Chakoria.
Absolutely. So this question, how has your personal experience and professional journey been impacted with child welfare? To answer this question truly and transparently, there is no has for me right now around the personal experience with child welfare. And I say that because I'm a single mom. I've got 6 kids. I work really hard. I'm a smart person. I'm a good person. And there's so many unknowns right now. So once you've been impacted by child welfare, it's like a reverberating kind of thing in the back of your existence that, oh, if I'm late one more time to school with my kids, or if my son wears those holy pants one more time, they're his favorite, but he looks like a bum, like nobody cares about him. As those things start building up, there's always in the back of your mind that someone is watching me. So that personal experience is ongoing. Professionally, though, I stand in spaces with people who often don't have much personal impact with the child welfare system. They've been in the policy or they've been a systems director, but they've not actually been an impacted person, or maybe even known an impacted person, or maybe even, had much involvement with people that they impact outside of the work they do. So in my professional roles as a consultant with systems impact experience is to remind folks that we're talking about not data and reports. We're talking about humans. We're talking about hearts, talking about families and children. At the bottom of all of this, and for me, it's at the top. I consider myself a community-centered consultant, but at the end of the day, at the reports and all the data that we have and know, those are people. Those are people who love each other, who want to do better, who may be experiencing hard times. And I also, in the personal space, strive to help folks remember their humanity. Often, and I've had a lot of employment over my years. I mean, often when you become an employee of an organization, you're vested in that environment, you're vested in that mission. I mean, you go to work. And in that environment, you know, you are working with the things that are coming down from your supervisor or coming across your desk. And sometimes it's possible to reprioritize, right? Like you have these work goals in mind, but my goal in these spaces is to constantly remind folks that we're all human, um, that prevention is can be a way of life, right? Like focusing on making sure things are doing good. That's wellness. Wellness is a prevention. Um, and as far as one more thing about the professional arena, there's a lot that happens with professionals in this line of work. We understand secondary trauma, and also it's my self-assigned duty to remind folks that you may be responding from generational narratives that you've heard, or there may be that's post-secondary trauma again. There may be like interpersonal conflict from the work you come to do and maybe the life you live outside of work or the people that you know outside of work. And that's okay because we are all humans in this thing. And my impact reminds me, my system impact reminds me that there are people who want to help and there are people who need help. And at any given day, we're both of those.
Thank you to Corey. I think both of you have really highlighted the importance of centering humanity and normalizing prevention as something that we all need. We all need help sometimes. We all need a village sometimes. So thank you for that. And Juan, go ahead. I heard you starting to speak.
Yeah, no, for me, it's just huge. Thank you to Corey and Kim. Even the times that we've met, that's always been insightful. And I was tearing up when I heard Kim talking to her. I was like, man, she hit it on the money. But for me, I think so 9/13, September 13th, and anybody that knows me knows me. So I like to share a lot of my own personal experience for good reasoning. But it's on September 13th, 2025, I will be celebrating 20 years clean and sober. On September 13th, 2025, we will also be celebrating 20 years of my daughter being alive. So she'll be turning 20. So it's the same date. That's the date that my case started with child welfare and my children were removed. And the day that she was born was the day when we decided, and that's it. And fast forward to now, as we're leaving, well, actually, not fast forward to now, but fast forward into we actually reunified. Those that stuck out to me the most when we're leaving, we're high-fiving, we're hugging because we reunified with the kiddos. We got them back. You know, it happened like just like I knew it would, right? And as we're walking out, I turn and look in the lobby, and all I see is brokenness with all our families. And the ones that stuck out the most to me, and it was a slow motion scene. I remember it vividly. As I turned, I felt like just life just slowed down. And the ones that stuck out to me the most were those dads that had no support around them, with their heads buried in their hands, for the most part by themselves. And it was at that moment that I realized the whys, right? I grew up always asking, why me? Why isn't my dad here? Why are we going through this? Why did this happen to me as a child? Why? And so it was at that moment where I see this is why. This is exactly why I'm walking with this story that change is possible, the message that change is possible, and what I need to do. So at that point, I realized my purpose in this world is really just to help the next man up, to provide support for those dads that just don't have it. And that's the biggest experience that I walk with, walking alongside some of these guys as a former parent partner. And also just as a father engagement coordinator, really looking to build capacity. Because a lot of times we find ourselves saying, "Hey, dads are important. Dads really need to hear this. Dads need to know this." What I've learned is dad do know this. Do we know this as systems and programs? Can we turn that question and really look at ourselves in the mirror? And that's one of the things that we started doing locally as a coalition is we need to stop doing, "Hey, dad, you can. Hey, dad, you should. Hey, dad." And we really need to look at what are we doing to create more, not just father-friendly environments, but more father-inclusive environments, right? How are we working as a systems and programs? And what is it that's out there in the community? Part of the feedback I would get from my dads is, "Hey, Mr. Solis, I appreciate the support, but when I go out in the community, there's nothing out there specifically for me. And the organizations that I do reach out to, they look at me like I'm weird because I'm asking for help." Or I'm being labeled as, a deadbeat dad, or I feel like I'm being labeled as this and this and that, right? And so really looking at how can we build capacity. And so I think for me, that's the biggest piece of how my personal experience has really impacted my professional lens, is looking at just supporting those guys out there and their families, really.
And Juan, I'm wondering if I can ask a follow-up question based on some of the conversations that this panel had prior to today. You've talked about the fact that you had system actors as champions for you in your process of reunifying with your daughter. Can you talk a little bit more about how foster parents and social workers use their education and their awareness to support you when you needed it?
I thought you were talking to Juan directly, but I can tell you stories of being that advocate myself, if you want me to chime in and share that one.
Go
But
for it.
okay, so again, I love to tell stories, but in this time of my life, I'll never forget Pam. I won't share her last name, but she had grown up in the system. If you can just imagine being in foster care since she was 2 years old and actually aged out of the foster care system, had two babies while in the foster care system that the system separated her from as a teenager at the ages of 15 and 16. I met her at the age of 23, 24, something like that. And she had twins. And the only reason why she was flagged at the hospital for her twins was because she was a former foster child who had lost a couple of children in care before. At that time, she had housing, she had an income, she was clean. Like there was no other reason other than that. I Pam, day one of meeting her, I stepped into her home, and of course, I'm a brand new caseworker, and I think I know something because I have a degree, right? No experience at this time. I'm still really, really young. She had her thumb in her mouth, legitimately, as I'm talking to her, telling her all the things that she would need to do, basically on this case plan in order to get her children back, quote unquote. After I was done with my spiel, Pam popped her thumb out of her mouth and she read me without cussing me out, thankfully, because she was a little spitfire. But she read me. She told me her story, and I listened. I listened to how she lost her children when she was a teenager, how she grew up in the system, how the system separated her not only from her family, but the only foster parent that she just wanted to go back to. And the reason why she decided to just be a destructor and all these things. Like I saw how this system shaped her and made her the young woman that she was that day. But to come alongside her and just advocate for her, number one, by listening, number one, by removing all the things that I said number one, number two, by removing all the things that I thought I knew and really just stepped into her world and into her shoes. What did Pam need? She didn't need someone coming with a case plan and telling her what she needed to do. She needed someone to support her along the way, to fight for her children, to fight, to be able to prove, quote unquote, again to the system, that she was capable and qualified. And I love the fact that I learned that so early in my career because I tap danced out of court with Pam. And legitimately tap dance out of court. We did a jig out of the court when they reunified Pam with her twins. She could do it, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed the village. She needed the support. And I was her number one advocate, the caseworker who was stepping in, again, telling her, if you don't do these things, then this is going to happen again. Termination of parental rights. I am so grateful that I was humble enough to just listen and help her create the village that she needed in order to be reunified with her boys. I'll never forget that.
So, yeah, I think for me, like my with my first in the beginning of my journey, there was key players, I call them. There are definitely key players that played a huge role in our success. Our church family definitely was our part of our village that really took us in and loved on us when we didn't feel like we deserved to be loved because of the situation we're in. And then also folks that we ended up meeting. I mean, my daughter's foster parents were one of our first cheerleaders. When we met them, they were the Smith family. Um, they were advocating that we go to my daughter's doctor's appointments because my daughter was born a little person. She has a type of dwarfism called achondroplasia. And so she had a lot of different doctor reports. She had 6 different specialists right off the bat. And so the foster mom would advocate and say, if these parents are going to reunify, they need to know the early beginnings of this stuff, right? And so our worker allowed us to go to these visits, and I'll never forget the first day that we met. At that time, I was still smoking cigarettes, and um, I remember brushing myself off, asking my wife, "Do I still look like a drug addict? Like, are we good? Are we good?" And I mean, we were so nervous. And as soon as we walked in, foster mom was like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Big old smile, and told my wife, "You look beautiful today." And afterwards, I'll never forget the conversation I had with my wife. My wife broke down in tears. She's like, "I've never been told that by anybody. No, not my mom. Nobody in my family has ever, treated me that way." And so as time went on, we were looking forward not just to visits for our kids, but also to visits just to see like what's she gonna say next? Like am I gonna look good this time? Right. And so I think them just giving us the words of encouragement, saying, "You know what? We're not trying to take your kids from you. We're just gonna we have a good home. They're safe with us. You just focus on what you got to do. Just do what you got to do, and you will reunify. There's no way you're not. You guys are amazing." They saw something in us that we didn't see. We've never seen, right? That nobody's ever pointed out to us, and so we held on to that. And I mean, the foster parent or foster dad, he took me on his fishing retreat with his church. We celebrated my daughter's first birthday at their house. My wife and I officially got married in 2007. They opened their doors and we held our reception at their home. And it was, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but that's just like they didn't have to, right? But they chose to and show love and because they saw something in us that we didn't see. And then my social worker as well, she did an amazing job of just really calling me in, not calling me out, but she was calling me in into any of the visits, any of the follow-up appointments, and would go out of her way not just to talk to my wife, but also follow up with me in an engaging way to her, like, "Hey, I see you, like that's good, I'm glad that you keep doing what you're doing, you're working," and like listening to the details. And to me, I think that was huge because I'm like, all right, she's just, checking boxes, and we're just, I'll just tell her what she wants to hear. But after a while, like towards the end, she's like, I knew I was BSing her for a while at first, like certain things. And she knew I was, but she never called me out on it, right? She allowed it to be my truth. And so towards the end, after everything was all said and done, and I would talk to her, and she's like, I knew, but it's not my job to call you out on this stuff. I trusted the process, and you're on track, right?" And so I think my wife and I's journey was a little different, only because I feel like we definitely were ready for that next step, but it took those folks to really believe in us, and to believe in me, right? Because I growing up, I never thought I knew I wanted more different. I knew I wanted more than what my parents gave, but I ended up even worse because my mom never got us taken. And here I am, everybody's separated. At the time, I had, 3 different kids in 3 different spots, and my wife was an inpatient, found myself alone. And I'm like, man, like, how did I allow this to happen? but it was those first, champions. I love that word. It was those first champions that really honored that space.
Thank you. An earlier webinar in this series talked about the difference between the transactional and the relational, and both of you have really highlighted stories where someone could have come into the situation with a transactional lens, and instead they came in with a relational lens, and it was life-changing. So thank you for sharing that. You're getting a lot of love in the chat, a lot of gratitude, congratulations, and an observation. I wish all foster parents did this. It's so important to build that relationship with the parents, and it leads to better outcomes for the children. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to be starting with Takoria on this question. How have you seen racial and other disproportionality in these systems impact the villages of support for families? And what can be done to address the negative impacts?
Thanks, Sabrina. And I really love this question, and I know my fellow panelists are going to really dive into this question as well. It's a packed question, so I'm going to proceed. I do have some notes here, but I also want to speak to the audience today. So as a child that was removed from an unsafe home right around the age of 12, and after that, I saw all kinds of care. I saw all the care: foster care, kinship care, congregate care. Every experience that you have as a person that's traumatic and isn't met with good healing practices, it pushes you a little bit further away from the middle of the societal norm spectrum, right? So we know that children who experience adverse childhoods struggle as adults. We've got a lot of ACE information, and we also got information around how positive relationships can make those things better. Yet when you are living under many layers, we talk about marginalization, right? So you're pushed over in the margins of society, but also there are layers to that. So being low income is one, being African American in certain situations is one. But a lot of people don't think about when you don't have a family or when you don't have a safe family and where that puts you in the margins. I got a lot of attention in school because I like books, and I did really well on the standardized test, right? So there was this expectation of me throughout my life to have this certain amount of capacity. And yes, intelligence is one capacity, but it is not all. The academic intelligence is one capacity, but it does not encompass all the intelligences, right? And some of them you learn from your family, some of them you learn from the people that you're around. And that's a human condition. So I want to think about marginalization and disproportionality around how it affects all of us, right? Like in some ways, in some situations and environments, I'm a marginalized individual. In some situations, like if you catch me at the reggae dance hall on Friday night, you might be the marginalized individual, right? So the marginalization is fluid, and I don't think there's, for me, I don't claim one type of people to be marginalized. I believe it involves the situation. So that was a lot to say what, right? Yes, I've seen marginalization and disproportionality. As a child who was removed into foster care, kinship care, and congregate care, I've seen a lot of disproportionality and a lot of how marginalization affects large communities of people. And then as someone who's working now as a lived experience consultant, as lived experience expert, right? I'm in situations with folks, and I can only recognize that their villages are also impacted by disproportionality and marginalization. The term ivory towers is pretty familiar in this work, right? But those folks that work in those ivory towers, they still have families. They still have situations and conditions. And the reason we don't call them impacted is because a lot of times situations can be taken care of outside of the public dollar, outside of the public view. I live in South Carolina, and I don't know if y'all watched the Netflix show about the Murdaughs. Like generations of good money, good social standing, all of those things, lawyers, titles, all of that. And yet the very fabric of that family was disturbed, right? So it just, when I think about racism and disproportionality in these systems, it really draws me to the fact that some families have their troubles and challenges on blast, and some families don't. And some people who work with families who have their hard times and challenges on blast are having hard times and challenges themselves. Yet the situations are very different. So when it comes to addressing challenges and gaps in my community, right, there might be things that you just don't know, that you miss. And it's not any kind of limited capacity, it's not any less of a person that you are. It's that this is your life is shaped out in a different way. My life is shaped out in a different way. Yet we're both moms, or we're all families. We're trying to take care of our loved ones. We want the best, and we're challenged. Mental illness isn't a demographic. Um, Childhood trauma, right? A study was done on a bunch of folks in California with good jobs. So there's so many layers to it. And I guess I want to kind of pass it to the next panelist around this idea that understanding your proximity to the situation is the best way to address negative impacts. So if you understand that your life experience has given you no proximity or little proximity, there may be some perspective that you're missing from the solution. And again, that's a margin, that's kind of creates a margin too, at least to me, right? You have some, you don't quite know, you're not proximate to that. And again, it's okay, it's not a capacity thing. It's let someone else in. Recognize that you might not be the expert of that situation, that you have a lot of things to share. And there is something that proximity does in a situation, that having it really makes a difference, and not having it, regardless of intent or purpose, not having that proximity um, lessens the connection a little bit, lessens the connection a little bit.
Kim, you want to add?
Yeah, Takoria, I can sit here and listen to you share, and I wanted you to keep going, but I'm grateful you volleyed over about proximity, because it just reminded me of some of the different spaces that I've been in as well. When we talk about, again, being close to this situation, like we can make, in my current role as the executive director of a nonprofit organization, I don't all the time have proximity to the families who are impacted by the work that we're doing, that are impacted by the decisions that we make, that are impacted by the policies and the practices and all of the things. I don't have that proximity. Grateful that I have the history and the years that I've experienced, in this work, so I can see things through a different lens. But we have to be reminded of that, right? You have to be very intentional about being, having that proximity. So thank you for volleying that over. And as I think about the question, I'm just going to say, the obvious when it comes to racial and other disproportionality and the impact on the villages and the different families that that are impacted by the system. As long as I've been involved in the system, we've seen that Black and brown children have been overrepresented in the foster care system, totally overrepresented. And these communities have been severely impacted. They're afraid. So when it comes to the impact of the villages, families aren't wanting to step in and get involved because now the lenses could be on them. They're fearful of the foster care system. They're fearful of reporters and investigators and all of the things. So to get involved again, it's like, I'm going to stay over here and I'm going to mind my business. This is not my business. It's so different from the way that I originally, like how I grew up. Families and communities stayed together. Churches, number one, did a lot of this system work. Now that the system have gotten involved, churches, now we have to go back out and ask the churches, hey, can you help us here? And some of the work that I've been doing, I'll never forget one of the pastors that I met. Again, he listened to me share all about, the numbers, the statistics, how many kids are in foster care, how many youth are aging out of foster care, the numbers in their community that are impacted by this system. And he let me do my little spiel and everything else, trying to get the church and the community engaged again. And basically he said, so y'all created a problem, now you want us to fix it. And I'm like, oh, that was a slap in my face, right? Because reality is we have, in so many ways, this broken system, we've contributed to the brokenness of the system. So what do we do? What do we do? Like there's so many little things that I know we've attempted to do when it comes to some of the disparities in foster care. I remember we talked about when we were brainstorming about this, we talked about blind removals. That's not always the solution, but I remember when blind removals became one of the things that our agencies wanted to implement. And what did it do? How did it change the way, children, if children were removed or if we brought supports in? Because you didn't say names, you didn't have addresses, you didn't give any other information that could give anybody any biases to this family. And you saw people thinking differently about how they could serve and support and walk alongside families. So I feel like I just said a whole bunch of stuff because, again, listening to you, Takoria, I'm just reminded of a lot of things that I've seen and we've experienced, and we haven't gotten a handle on, honestly. Juan.
No, thank you for that, Kim and Takora. You guys are awesome. Ladies are awesome. But when we talk about villages, right, it's in parentheses. It says disproportionate these systems impact the villages. And I see, villages, even after reunification, is not a full village because we miss the mark sometimes. And at times for me with the father engagement lens, we miss something. Even if kiddos do reunify with mom, which is great, we don't want that to change. But we miss the opportunity of not just involving dad. So in the father engagement piece, we always think about advocating for dad, but that's part of it. It's not the full picture, right? When we talk about safety networks for our kiddos, at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. And yeah, I advocate for fathers all day long, but it's with a bigger lens. If we're able to engage dads and partner with dads and allow dads to be part of that village, the network comes behind it, right? Paternal aunt, paternal uncle, paternal grandma, and grandpa, and everything else in between. Paternal, friends and acquaintances that can also be a support, right? Paternal or dad's spiritual folks, that he might have a separate church or whatever have you. Just that whole support comes along with it. And I feel that that's some of the things that we tend to forget. We tend to leave out, whether it be because it's difficult or, dad didn't answer the phone, so I did my job. It goes a little bit further into that. And that's some of the things that we've seen. And so when we look at the village, ask yourself, what is that village? I feel like in my opinion, that word gets thrown around very loosely at times. And we need to really honor, what does that village look like for that child? And so when I thought about that statement alone, what does that village look for that child? Like I asked my kids, like, what does that community look like to you? And my son, who at the time was 8 years old, was like, well, even the guys at the 99 cent store, I consider them, or at the Stater Brothers, I consider them part of our community because they call you coach. Like they ask you about how your day was and how the kids and how's your wife, and they seem to care. And isn't that what community stands for? Isn't that, don't you, isn't people from your community or people that care about you, right? And I'm like, wow, that's pretty impactful for an 8-year old to say. And I feel like really asking, what does that village look like to our kids, to our families? And we can't exclude that. We have to honor their truth, honor their view, right? And so I feel like that's one of the biggest pieces that I feel like we really can benefit from when we say we work with families, meet them where they're at. What does what does their village look like? It's funny because I talk about the safety networks and the support systems and all that. And in my time in child welfare, I would ask my dads, like, hey, let's fill out this little safety circle activity. Who's your support network? Who's your safety network, right? And I started adding the support system a part of that because in my experience with my early days in recovery, some of the people that I would go to NA meetings with, they were part of the support system. I probably won't let them watch my kids, but they were still part of my support system, right? And how should we not honor that? Isn't that part of my village at the time, right? So I would ask, hey, okay, so outside of your safety network, these are the people that really, really love your kiddos. Can we bring them a little closer in the middle? But then I would also ask, what does your support system look like? Maybe not someone that you would have, watch your kids, but still, still kind of be there for you as a support. Oh, my barber. I would get things like my barber, man. And I know when you go to the barber, and I'm sure ladies, you can relate when you go to the beauty salon, it's not just a hairdo. We talk about everything under the sun, right? It's like a whole therapy session. I think barbers should get paid more, but that's part of the village, right?
Juan, you have me. I'm smiling because I'm over here thinking about the Candy Man. I don't know if y'all remember back in the day when the Candy Man used to come through the community, the ice cream lady, the mailman, the insurance man, all of those people knew our family and they knew that I was the little girl who was home by myself because I was a latchkey kid, right? And so they kept eyes, everybody kept eyes on us. Miss Louise who lived next door, Mr. I can't remember his name who lived over here, Mr. Truck. I still call him Mr. Truck to this day. Like yeah, because he drove this big green truck. So I called him Mr. Truck. I think his first name is Chuck, but I was a kid, and so it's implanted in my brain. I'm going to call him Mr. Truck. So I mean, but thinking about who your community is, when we've done these types of things with families, just trying to identify who's your support network. I've heard so many times, I have no one, I don't have any family. Think outside of your family. It is the bus driver. It is somebody that you work with. It is this person, that's at, I don't know, UPS or somewhere. It is whomever's in your community and provides support and care of you. We all have it. We all need it. How do we empower our villages to truly take care of our families? Everybody on this call has an auntie or uncle or a cousin that is not biologically related to you, but you call them auntie whoever or uncle whoever. You can't tell me you don't have it because we all do. It's not about blood. And so how do we empower our villages to really step up and support our families? Because our systems, they're broken. They're not doing it well. We need family to be able to do that. And that's, again, not just blood.
I've got a little bit I'd like to share around that. So as a child who came out of congregate care a year early, I graduated high school a year early so I could get out of that place. I did not have permanency, right? There was not a family for me. There was relatives, but there was not family. So there would be years, there was no happy birthdays or like those kinds of things. And the system is a lot better now. I was a kid back in the 80s or so. But the system's doing a lot better now. Yet there are still people in our communities who don't have that permanency. And there was a long time that I sat in that space of not having anyone because I didn't have anyone. There were those weak ties, like the folks at the grocery store or the male person. But it was also because I didn't understand about connection, right? I didn't know the value. I'd never felt something so meaningful and positive that I would want more of it. And I'm sharing my experience because I know I'm not the only one. And I know that there are lots of folks that you all come in contact with who are in stages of that feralness, right? We're in the village, but not really. We're kind of around. Maybe somebody puts out a little food for us every once in a while. Um, but we're kind of skittish around understanding what it really means to make good connections. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that here because as we think about supporting families and we think about folks who are reaching for wellness, who are reaching for knowing what that village life is like, that we have to really do a good job of meeting folks where they are and hearing what they say. Listening isn't just an option or something that you can do passively. In this work, you must listen with your heart, you must listen with your head, you must listen with not that frame of, oh, this person has done something, right? Because we have done things, all of us. But what has happened with this person to have them where they are now? What has happened in this person's life, no matter how they're presenting to me right now? What else is there? And being curious about the human experience is how we do that. It's how we combat that how we combat that disconnection, right? That can happen for folks who are so severely impacted or so over long terms, generations. Again, remembering and centering humanity.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that last piece of that question, what can be done to address the negative impacts aside of everything else we've already discussed? I think there's 87 people on this call. If 87 of these people can just start having that conversation of how we can support families and changing the narrative on even in just discussions, oh yeah, that's a call for sure. I mean, just get away from that. Like, don't say that's a call. Like, how can we support that family? You know, what can be done? Who can we connect this family to so that they can get the support that's needed? I mean, you see what's going on, you kind of have an idea, and we've been conditioned to just automatically report or automatically, oh yeah, that's definitely. Let's start having more conversations of what family support actually looks like.
And you know what, one that kind of brings us right back to that conversation we just had about proximity. And in social work, there is a disproportion of folks who don't have proximity to the folks that they're working with outside of the work, right? So it's really important to remember that sometimes you need, again, to pass the torch. You need to listen. You need to recognize your capacity and your proximity in that position.
Thank you so much for the rich discussion. We've already started to segue into the third and final question, just naturally. So I'm going to prompt our friends at Caltrain to drop that in the chat so everyone can see it. But we're already getting there. And this is a time when our audience can get their action sheets out if they haven't already, because there are a host of professionals here across different areas of child welfare and social services work. And so what we are starting to talk about is what can each individual person do internally and in their own roles in the system, in the profession, to rebuild the village. And Juan, we were going to kick it to you for this question. I don't know if you have anything additional beyond what you just said to kind of empower people to take action steps to rebuild the village.
I think number one is really looking at what defines the village to you, and then take that and match it to what family or a child would say that village is defined by them, and just really honoring that and working from that aspect. For me, my village, it was difficult for me to even look at that word. Like I'm talking about when I was going through it early on. Like, we had to cut ties with everyone, right? Because they were telling me, like, yeah, while I was learning things like people, places, and things will take you out and you'll relapse. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to cut people, places, and things out. Okay, what does that look like? I can't go to 99 cent store no more. I remember my wife would tell me things like, we can't, those are triggers. I'm like, why is a 99-cent store a trigger? Because they have the little car fresheners, the glass vials that would, and you'd make the pipes out of that. I'm like, wow, the Bic lighter, those are all triggers, right? And then the people, like everybody that we knew was on something. And so we had to cut that out. And so we had to really define and redefine what that village looks like for us, even though we weren't saying calling it a village. But what does that support system look like? I think faith-based organizations that gets thrown around loosely. We need to engage and engage the faith-based community. What does that mean? And are we really doing that? Like just inviting them to meetings, it just not that's not it, right? It's really working alongside with the faith-based organizations and hearing them out because they have a need as well, right? And are we meeting the need, or is it just a one-sided effort where you just want the faith-based organizations helping you, but nothing in return, right? And so looking at that, I think is really, really important. But yeah, everything I was just re-emphasizing on what that village is. How can we rebuild the village? Is just defining that village alongside with families, and looking outside the box of engagement strategies to really make sure that that village is solidified and strengthened, and engaged properly.
And I just want to piggyback on that one. When you started talking about like knowing who the village is, we can't step into these communities and spaces and assume we know anything, right? I learned years ago it changing from cultural competency to cultural humility and entering in that space humbly. Like just because we are both Black, for example, does not mean anything culturally. Like I know what you need and I know how you live and I don't know anything about you. So entering into this space with humility, asking questions. When you talked about, it's not just inviting the pastors or the leaders in the community to the meeting, yes, inviting them to the table, allowing them to share and use their voices and help them help us. We walk alongside in creating the response to what their community needs because we don't know. So it is instead of us saying, hey, here's what we want to do, it's more of a, hey, what do you need and what does this look like? As we come in and we work alongside together, and not us as nonprofits or different organizations being the drivers here. The community knows what they need. I, as a family, I know what my family needs. You don't know anything about me. And so I even train my workers in that same space, entering in that space with curiosity, trying to understand how can we support and walk alongside. No one's a savior here. I'm not trying to be a savior. There's only one savior, that's Jesus Christ. But to be able to walk into this space, and I don't know, provide a support and everything else, but do that collectively and collaboratively. Other things that I was thinking of, like, again, what would Love Say do when we have to make decisions about things? If you were in this space, how would you want, decisions to be made for you or about you, with you, alongside you, instead of for you in so many ways? All the things, being the adult that you may have needed as a child, being the friend that you needed. Again, it's all about humility and humanity as well. I have I don't know, well, I'm thinking one of my, again, being in this space with proximity and again, elevating the voices of those with lived experience. I'm in this group with this young lady who too had experienced the system, and is still dealing with the ramifications of that, the lifelong impact of that with her children and her family and just everything that she's going through. She shared this post on LinkedIn, and if you don't mind, I want to share it because it talks about, like, again, community. And since it was a public post for me to share this publicly, it's short, but she says, it finally happened. I got an apology from the system. Well, not exactly, but my neighbor who provided collateral on my last CPS investigation did. They apologized. And it leaves me with mixed feelings. There's nothing more serious than being an accomplice to threaten the safety of one's children. The simple misunderstanding that led to talking to an investigative worker about me caused a lifetime of irreparable harm and generational devastation. At the same time, I know exactly what the system wants: for our communities to turn on each other, to isolate ourselves and stop supporting each other. Divided, we fall. but I refuse to let that happen. I want to move forward and show up with community support and connection. But it's hard when you know how much was at stake. The damage done isn't healed by words alone. The weight of those moments stick with you. Here's what I've learned. Community, real community, is the antidote to this toxic system. It's the only way we can heal and move forward. So how can we build that together? Let's put our energy into lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. We need to have each other's backs, especially when the system isn't there to protect us. When we support one another, we become unbreakable. Let's take back that power. Community, y'all. Community. That's what we need. And how do we do that and be that for each other? It starts with each one of you. Everyone in here can be community to someone else to help us rebuild that village.
Yeah, I had to take a little breath there. So those words can settle on y'all. Because this isn't a task list. This isn't a checklist. This isn't some things you can put on your to-do and say you got this done next week, right? When it comes to being available and being able and being hands-on and rebuilding the village, it's not a checklist. All villages and all of us are living in, I guess I'm going to describe it as generational patterns of behavior. And that is just part of the human experience, right? We grow up in families who talk a certain way, who use certain words, who cook certain dishes, who have certain ideals. We live in society that puts things out in the great storyteller media that we have here in America. And so we're all affected, and we all have these patterns of behavior. So in order to really be consistent and serious about rebuilding the village, the first thing that we need to do is to apply the mirror, right? Apply the reflective opportunity of looking at yourself and saying, how can I see myself in this situation? What is familiar to me in this situation? And becoming familiar, if you know me, you know I love words, is how you find family outside of, as we were talking about, those blood connections. If it feels familiar, there's some familiarity you can find in that, then it's closer to you. It's closer to a part of you, right? So in order to rebuild the village, because yes, we've had damage. This is America. So yes, there's a bit of rebuild that has to do. But in order to do that, we also have to be okay with making mistakes and saying, I did something that wasn't right. Let me come back and say, I did something that wasn't right, and I'm here to make it better. Oftentimes in our professional arenas, we are driven by this idea that we have to get it right, and perfection is the only thing that's worthy, and that getting the right answer or making the right numbers is the goal. And it's not. When you're with humans and you're in human service and you're dealing with families, the goal is to walk alongside. And families are imperfect and humans are imperfect. So when you see mistakes, it's not, okay, there's a mistake. Let's shine all the lights on that. It's not what's wrong. Again, it's what happened? When you're walking alongside families and children, it's not looking for what's wrong. It's always looking for what happened. And then doing that reflective moment to say, where in here can I see love? Where in here can I see care? Where do I see the empathy in this? Where do I see the compassion in this? So taking a moment to connect yourself, whoever you are, right, to the situation, to the predicament, to the solution, because that's part of prevention. If you are taking care of yourself and focusing your wellness and dealing with those things that come up, we're humans in a world that's full of things. I'm going to use my nice words today. It's full of a lot of things, right? And things are happening all the time. And a lot of it we just don't understand. It's confusion. And it feels bad. And especially these days, and I'm going to speak for me, I'm going to use I statements. I feel like I'm often on a line or the verge of up against something. And sometimes that leaves me a little tense. And I've had to be careful with myself to say, okay, let's just take some time, breathe. This isn't you. This isn't where you are. This is the external conditions. This is a generational thought pattern that you can undo. This is a bias that you may have. You need to look at it, because I believe in spending that reflective time, because I want to build my village so strong, right? I don't want to build my village based on things that have hurt in the past, or things that didn't go well in the past, or what went wrong. I don't want to build my family on what went wrong. I want to build my family on what is good. What is love? Do we make mistakes? Yes, and we fix them, and that grows relationships, and not just in families and close relations, but also in systems. There is benefit to saying, I don't know, and I don't know is an okay answer, especially in this work, right? I might not be the best person to help you with this. It's a perfectly beautiful answer, because it gets the person to where they need to be. And it might not be your title. It might not be your degree that fixes it. It might not even be, for people like me, parent and community leaders, it might not even be your passion and pleas that fix it, right? But it is you going out there and doing your best and being mindful that we're all humans. We all need help sometimes, and sometimes you are the helper. It's about remembering our place, not as like this cogs in the wheel concept, but we are literally connected. We're connected as humans. We breathe air, we drink water, we eat food. Like we're energetic beings. We are connected, and really living into that and embracing that, and being okay with making mistakes, as long as you go back and try to fix it. That is critical to build and rebuild, of families, of strong communities.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, because it just struck a chord. Um, just a reminder of, sometimes when we're building, and this something I love this question, because when we talk about rebuild, something I literally had to do from scratch in my early recovery days. And sometimes we don't even know what's out in the village. We don't know what's out in the community. It wasn't until 2008. So we got our clean, and our case started in 2005. In 2008, we still had contact with our social worker. She would send us stuff in the mail about events. We would go set up in events. We would talk to parents voluntarily on, navigating the child welfare system. It wasn't until 2010 when my wife and I were called to start the parent partner program for San Bernardino County, working alongside with families. But at that time in 2008, my social worker would send us something in the mail and say, hey, you should take your kiddos to this AYSO program. And I had sucker written on my forehead, because I started coaching and volunteering, and didn't realize, like, it's to this day I still coach. I got my club license, and it's probably one of the best things that we've ever been able to be a part of, to be able to mentor other kiddos. Right now I have a current of over 20 players that I have on a team. Then we're mentoring alongside, right? These are teenagers, they're 15, 16-year-olds. And the whole experience, as we just closed one chapter with my middle daughter, who just finally hung up her boots after playing at the college level, and started playing at 3 years old, and looking at going into the military after getting her psychology degree. We started reminiscing on all the journey, and it never fails. Where we look back at the time where we actually started getting into that journey, we were just realizing that the grass is green and the sky was blue at that time. We were just wanted to be a part of something, and we found this organically. We found this whole a soccer family, a network, right? And we started building relationships there. But prior to that, like, we didn't know what was out in the community. So keep that in mind. Like, sometimes you may need, and when you talk about focusing on strengths, I love that. I had no idea. I didn't know what strengths I had until I was looking at things from a different sense. networking was always one of my biggest strengths. Because in the streets, you need to know where's what and who has what and who is where. And networking was always big for me. I just never seen it from a different aspect, to where now like networking is still a big piece of what I do, because I want to know what's out there for my families. The more I know, the more my families can benefit from, right? The resources that are available. So our families at times they have no idea what's out in the community. And so that's also part of rebuilding the village, is also letting and informing folks what that village can look like and what is available.
I just want to chime in as well, because as I'm thinking about even this question, it is something that you have to be very intentional about in your everyday work, because it's not necessarily the thing that we do every day, right? Like, you have to be intentional about focusing on family. You have to be intentional about helping families rebuild their villages. You have to get out of your different day, same thing, your policy, and following the same thing that you do every day. You have to make space for conversations like this. You have to make space to reimagine the ways that you could do this work and do it differently, instead of continuing on with what you did last year and the years before. So I just want to challenge folks to not leave conversations like this and then to go back, to your work and keep doing the same thing you've been doing, right? Because it's important for us to continue these conversations, to take this back, regardless of what role you're in, to take this back to your teams, to take this back to your organizations, and have more discussions about how can we, take our mask off, see things through different lens. How can we self-reflect and be intentional about seeing what we bring to the table and how it impacts the work that we do? Because we all have something, right? We all have something that we bring to this table. We all have something that impacts what we do, how we do it, why we do it, what we see, what we hear, what we choose to be moved about, something that drives you. So to continue to have these discussions is the only thing that I just wanted to wrap up and share. Like, let's just not leave this space this way.
And to add a little encouragement to that, as you go and do these things differently and venture into the uncomfortable, know that if you feel uncomfortable, that's exactly what you're supposed to feel. There's nothing wrong with feeling uncomfortable when up against change. The human brain is wired for that. That is a human experience, to be uncomfortable when facing change. It is so that you pay attention. It is so that you record in your body, in yourself, that there's something significant happening right now. So change does feel uncomfortable, and it's supposed to feel uncomfortable. And as you do this work, if you never feel uncomfortable, that should trigger, like, maybe I haven't changed enough. Maybe there's some change there that I can reach for. Again, there is neuroscience that supports that uncomfortable feeling, saying, yes, that is change. You must move through something. And it is significant when you feel that feeling. So acknowledge it as a helper as you get through what you are getting through, as you change your perspective, as you break generational patterns of behavior, right? As you come out of ways of thinking that allow you to see more love, that allow you to connect more humanly with folks. And it's a process, right? We're all day to day, if you're committed, you're learning how to be a better human every day. Go with the change, go with the discomfort, know your brain is supporting you in that, and that coming up on the other end, you will think different, right? You'll learn different, you'll feel different, and you'll be different. And that is the difference that actually brings you closer to the people that you're working with, to the communities that you're building, to the families that you are strengthening. You're strengthening yourself, having gone through that discomfort and change. You've gotten a little stronger, and you're adding that strength to the families that you're working with.
And that, Takoria, builds that trust that we need in our communities in order to be change, right? We have to, it builds trust. We need trust. Trust has been broken. And doing all of those things helps rebuild that trust. So yeah, I love it.
Me too. And I can't think of a better way to end this discussion. That was incredibly powerful. I think if you all can hear it in the back, I mean, it starts with you. It is a mindset shift. You will struggle, you'll fail, you'll take these takeaways back to your spaces and the roles that you're in, and maybe those discussions will go catastrophically. And then you'll think and reflect and come back and try it again. Because the work demands that you do it. And so I am just so incredibly grateful to Coria and Kim and Juan. We didn't get any questions, I think, because we all just wanted your words to wash over us. I think everyone is just letting it sink in and having so much gratitude for what you have to share. So thank you very much. We'll wrap up here. And Jess, am I passing it back to you to
Yes, please.
conclude? Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm one of the people that I'm just soaking it all in. And these last couple of notes I have are just to wrap up our time today. But of course, on behalf of the participants, I want to extend just a heartfelt thank you to each and every panelist for generously sharing not just your time, these valuable insights, your experience. And I think what you've added to this conversation wraps so well around the concept of it takes a village and what does it look like from the inside out. Of course, we want to thank Sabrina for moderating this incredible conversation as well. So thank you, Sabrina. I also want to give you just all a few notes before we go and ensure that you know how to stay connected to a village throughout the year, not just in the month of April. We are going to be sending out materials, I suppose the recording, in a 2-day follow-up email to your registration email. But if you would like to look back on all of the incredible sessions, and I'm actually going to put this up here again, just to remind you, over the course of the last several weeks, there's been incredible presenters. We've had incredible discussions, and each one has asked you, what do you want to do with this information next? And I appreciate that question because as I've often heard said, knowledge is not power, knowledge is potential power. What you do with the knowledge you have really is where change comes from. So I'd ask you to think about some of the things that you've heard, not just today, but also in the previous weeks, and ask yourself, what does that look like for me? What could that mean? Exploring those resources and then taking one small and significant action. So with that, I also want to extend a huge thank you to the Office of Child Abuse Prevention for putting on this series, by the way, for folding in partners like the CAP Center. So thank you so much, CAP Center. Thank you, Safe and Sound. And of course, I am representing Caltrin, the California Training Institute. These partners have worked for weeks and weeks to make sure that these sessions came to you. And something that we would ask you as participants is if you would do 2 things. Number 1, fill out that survey because those surveys help inform what next year looks like. And also, I'd ask you to consider looking at those replay, the replay YouTube channel, which is in the chat for you now, has all of the resources, has the recordings from these sessions. And don't forget that I want to say the remake, that's not the word. The makeup day for webinar number 3 is happening on May 14th. It's the Safe and Sound Lunch and Learn. That, if you've already registered, does not require another registration. The same registration will work. So with that, I want to say thank you all so much. There might be a question here about any contact information for the presenters. If they are comfortable sharing, they can drop that information into the chat for you. And we want to say thank you all so much. And we will see you next year, next April. I'll share this end slide so that you can capture some of those important pieces of detail, use that QR code, send those emails, and we will see you again next year. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.